protection specialist. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Doreen Julian Nalwanga. I'm an ICT specialist with OPM, but I also work closely with Ministry of Gender in the establishment of the single registry, which we are planning to upgrade to the social registry, and I'm glad to be here.
Hi, I'm Amelia Charles. I'm the Regional Child Sensitive Social Protection Advisor for Save the Children.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mercy Koko. I'm the Cash and Social Protection Specialist, Save the Children.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Priya Tyagaraja, the Deputy Director for Program Development and Quality for Save the Children Uganda.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Opolot Jacob Richards, the Advocacy Advisor for Uganda Parliamentary Forum for Social Protection, and here for Chairperson.
Morning, everybody. I'm Stephen Kasaija. I head the Program Management Unit for Expanding Social Protection under the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development. I think we are jumping the honor.
Ezra Suruma, I'm the Chancellor of Makerere University.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Paul Onapa, the Deputy Head of the Expanding Social Protection Program.
Good morning, everyone. Daniel Winter Putan. I work for the World Food Program as a Technical Coordinator in charge of Social Protection System Strengthening, supporting the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development and Office of the Prime Minister. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First, I want to say you're very much welcome. I'm very excited to see all of you, especially some of you did not respond to the email, so I was worried. But I'm very excited to see all of you here. You're welcome. My name is Gloria Nakajubi, and I work with the Uganda Parliamentary Forum on Social Protection. Thank you.
Thank you, Gloria, and thank you, everybody. And in a very special way, I would like to introduce our online audience. Alana Kembabazi, Beatrice Okilan, Bena Nakasuja, Hafitha Isa, Julie Gria Villat, sorry, I can't get that pronunciation right, and Michelle Aineviona. We're really delighted to have you online, and ladies in the room and gentlemen, this is why we are projecting this, so they are able to see and will be able to engage with us during the Q&A session. So at this moment, I would like to invite Mr. Kasaija in 1, maximum 2 minutes to come and welcome us, because this event has been hosted in partnership between the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development and the Uganda Parliamentary Forum for Social Protection. Over to you, Stephen.
Thank you. Thank you, moderator. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, once again. I've already been introduced as Stephen Kasaija from the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development, Expanding Social Protection Program. It's a privilege for me to stand in for the Director of Social Protection, who was supposed to be opening this meeting. All protocol observed. Members, I wish to say that as a ministry, we are very happy to see that our community of practice on social protection is being inaugurated today, because I think this creates another useful institution, useful fora or platform where we can all discuss, engage, and get good decisions, get good policies, inform, or good evidence which we can inform our policy development as far as social protection is concerned. I know as a Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development, we have been at the helm of spearheading social protection. It has not been an easy journey, and I believe some of you who are in this room know where we have come from. So when we see such a day, when we can now talk of practitioners of social protection in Uganda coming together, I think this is an encouragement to us, and it gives us hope that issues of risk and vulnerability affecting our population, we are going to find a good way forward on how we tackle that business. So at this stage, I wish to appreciate our Parliamentary Forum on Social Protection. We recognize the chairperson, Honorable Jacob, who is standing in for the chairperson. We really appreciate for having added a lot of energy to make sure that this community of practice takes off. We appreciate Honorable Suruma, who has been our ally all along in the areas of social protection. And every time we have called on him, he has always been there for us and supported. So we welcome you once again. We are honored to have you again here. Our colleagues from the World Food Program, we really appreciate you have put in a lot to try and make sure that we have systems for social protection strengthened. We appreciate that. Our colleagues from the labor unions, we really appreciate. Without you, social protection can't move ahead. Colleagues from Office of the Prime Minister, they have been also allies driving a lot of intervention on social protection. And Save the Children, I think you have been there. The first policy and work on social protection in Uganda, we did it with Save the Children. A long time ago when we were starting, when the British came in to help, they helped us through the Save the Children. So the first planning on social protection, it's good you are welcome again, and we want to count on you and this community of practice. So I think a community of practice, many of us have seen it. We have one on Africa Community of Practice on social protection. We have hosted one here where we bring all countries from Africa which are participating in social protection, and it is good, you learn a lot of what is happening. So we believe that through this community of practice, all the practitioners should be able to bring on table what they are doing, and we can easily get information and see how we are doing, what have we learned, so that we can improve on our planning, improve on our policy development. So really, on behalf of the ministry, and without wasting time, we are happy that we are here, and we wish you a very useful discussion, and we inaugurate this community of practice. Thank you very much, members. The person told me 2 minutes. I think I have overshot by 1 already. So let me stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Stephen, and thank you for the great work you've done championing social protection in Uganda. So we are preparing to load a presentation on the community of practice, basically, since Stephen mentioned it's being launched today, and Gloria is going to take us through it. So in a few seconds, I'll hook her up.
Thank you so much. This is really about a few minutes, and considering that Mr. Kasaija has already pointed to what the community of practice is, so we're just going to go through a few detail to it. And once again, I'm Gloria Nakajubi, and I work with the Uganda Parliamentary Forum on Social Protection. We are very glad to have been coordinating this particular engagement with support from the Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development and our different partners, World Food Program, UNICEF, Help Age International, and I mean, all the different stakeholders, really. We want to appreciate you for making this particular engagement happen. We had a virtual engagement for the community of practice. So this is our first hybrid meeting. So we get to see each other in person, but also we have our different members who are online. So thank you once again for joining this particular meeting. So the community of practice really is a network. As Mr. Kasaija has highlighted, it's a network of the different players in the social protection subsector. We're looking at the policymakers, researchers, and of course, advocates of social protection, the implementers of social protection. So where we come together, a space where we come together and have conversations around social protection, a space where we come and mentor each other, because we know we have people that have a wealth of knowledge around social protection among us. So this space is supposed to bring us together so that we are able to tap from each other. Then also we are looking at opportunities that come in. How do we ensure that the different people that are interested in social protection are able to tap into the wealth that is out there? So we have mentorship, training, and of course problem solving. So we pick, for each particular session we pick an issue of interest, and we all know, for instance, for this particular engagement, social protection financing is the core of especially our advocacy. How do we ensure that we move from the current less than 1% of GDP to a more reasonable but also a more appropriate percentage of our GDP going towards social protection? So this really is ideally that space that should be able to accord us that opportunity to have these conversations. And we're very glad that the Ministry of Gender is, you could say if it was a person, they are the patron of the social protection community of practice, and we are very excited that we are destined to do greater things in this particular space. What we do, I've already pointed on some of that. We do support members to improve their understanding of social protection and develop capabilities around social protection. We do exchange and advance knowledge, insights, best practices, and tools. We also support the dissemination of social protection resources through a curated resource collection, webinars, and dialogue or discussions. We also provide opportunities for members to discuss and problem-solve challenges around implementation, learning, implementation of and learning about social protection, but also facilitate peer-to-peer technical support and providing a space for brainstorming and linking ideas generation and problem solving. We also support professional development through sharing resources and opportunities in line with technical competencies. So because we know that each one of us comes from an area that has a strength on a particular aspect of social protection. So when we meet, we believe that we actually have like it's a gathering of minds that can be able to tap into each other and be able to improve each other. So really that's the essence of this community of practice. Who can join? As I've already indicated, really, it's an open space, so we're looking at both state and non-state actors, and we currently have a subscription of over 62 members from the different MDAs, CSOs, academia, international NGOs, and UN agencies. Maybe to just briefly take us back, the community of practice started as an initiative of the International Training Program. So it was really a space for the alumni of the International Training Program for Social Protection that is coordinated by the Economic Policy Research Institute. Maybe to say the alumni of ITP, Please wave. Yeah, I know many more are online, but so we realized that we actually needed to open this up beyond ITP. There are many people that have gone through different capacity development programs, the Transform program that is being coordinated by World Food Program. So we have opened this space up so that we can have us feed from each other from the different points of capacity building. The meetings. So the plan is to actually have these meetings conducted once every 2 months, and these can be hosted by any of the member organizations or partners. So we'll be very glad to hear any offers for our next meeting after here. So these can either be virtual, physical, or hybrid. And of course, today's meeting, we are very glad to that the World Food Program and partners Help Age, Ministry of Gender were able to actually provide the funding and technical support to actually have this happen. Yeah, so the community of practice really, we are looking at social protection in its entirety. So we're looking at policymakers, we're looking at implementers, research, the academia, who are focusing on all these aspects of social protection, but also looking at the overall, from the aspect of the life cycle approach to social protection. So that is who we are, and we are excited for all, for the new members, those who have not yet subscribed, please subscribe so that we can push the social protection agenda forward. Thank you so much. That's it from me, and that's the social protection community of practice.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Gloria. Since we already had our break tea, may I ask Paul Onapa to step up if you can get his presentation ready so that we can go straight into the status of social protection coverage and financing in Uganda.
Thank you very much, David. And good morning once again, ladies and gentlemen. In this presentation, very quickly, we'll be able to navigate very quick on the vulnerabilities that we face as a nation. And then after that, very briefly into contextualizing what social protection is, because we know that we define and understand social protection differently. And then we'll look at the legal framework and then the existing social protection programs and the financing landscape. We're told that this presentation will give a bird's eye view of what exactly we're doing in social protection. On the vulnerabilities along the life cycle, we note that as people grow from what they call birth to the grave, we encounter different sets of vulnerabilities. And here we just give you a snippet on some of these that we do experience along the life cycle, starting with early childhood, where we still daunted with the big task of tackling stuntedness. And again, the data that we have from the ministry indicates that our children, about 29%, who are between 6 to 59 months, are still stunted. And seemingly, also relatedly, we have 11% who are underweight, and up to 49% did not have vaccinations, basic vaccinations in their first year. Now, you don't want to have this scenario among your population because problems in early childhood affect productivity in the later years. So sometimes it's good to address this when it's still very young. On the school-going age, we note that about 28% are involved in child labor. And when you have 28% of your population in child labor, it means that you've pulled them away from school, and by so doing, they will not finish the full cycle of school. And if you don't get your people finishing the full cycle of school, then again, you affect the total productivity of your population. And up to 50% do not complete primary school. Enrollment, you will agree with me that over the years, enrollment has been very, very good. As a nation, we have made significant strides in improving, particularly primary enrollment, but completion is a challenge. So where does the other 50% go after primary school? Now that creates that population that we normally talk about NEET, not in school and not in training. So it means they're basically there. And those also pose a very big risk to the nation. And up to 56% live in multidimensional poverty. Multidimensional poverty is a measure of poverty that looks at different facets of poverty, not only income poverty. Looks at income, looks at access to health, looks at education, housing, and others. Now, when you transition to the working age, that is supposedly supposed to be the most productive age of a nation, about 9% are unemployed. Of course, with unemployment, normally the question is, depending on how you define it, you will agree on different figures. For us to use the classic ILO definition of unemployment, and this is from UBOS. But also we note that during COVID time, 1 in every person lost their job, which speaks to the question of vulnerability during pandemics that leads to loss of jobs, leads to loss of incomes, and therefore leads to loss of earnings. And the big one is also there. 36% live in the subsistence economy. And these ones work from hand to mouth. And that's why when government is struggling to find them under the parish development model, we're simply seeking for how do we transition these people from this supposedly big sector of the subsistence economy, but it's hand to mouth. It doesn't lead to production, so to move them into the productive sector. But also, those that are working, the quality of jobs are still very low, and I'm very glad that the people from the trade unions are here. They will agree with me. The issues of low pay are still a challenge. Lack of social security is still a challenge, as we shall be seeing. So if you go to the concept of decent work, there are still challenges, even with the quality of the jobs that we provide. And of course, as you retire to old age, which is 60 plus, ordinarily you're supposed to be retiring to a comfortable life, having worked all your years and seeing how the state looks at you. But what we get looks after you. What we get now is that so far, our total population of 60 years and above is 4.3%, which is about 1.5 million. Now you note that life expectancy has been increasing, and we must credit the government for this. Right now we're about 63 for men and 64 for women, with the hope that this will continue to increase. And it's even projected that by 2030, we could be 2050, we could be well over 6 million people who are aged 60 years and above. But of these, while we have many people increasing to living longer, 45% of them live in poverty. And of all of these, only 1 in 5 have access to any form of credit. Could be good, could be cash, or could be services. Which means that you're living longer, but you're going to live in vulnerability. And again, the aspect of pension, is still a challenge. But it's also important for us to note, and I say this because this provides the foundation for why we need social protection and for why social protection should be prioritized in line with the theme of this engagement. We also have a series of idiosyncratic shocks that affect people across the life cycle. Look at chronic illness. Look at disability, HIV and AIDS, death, injury, and job loss. But as you have all this affecting you, we don't have health insurance. Only about under 2% can access health insurance coverage. So that means that if you get a chronic illness and you can't afford to pay, or your family cannot afford to pay, you've simply sentenced yourself to death. If you get a disability and maybe you are not contributing to NSSF, then you've simply sentenced yourself to a life of misery. But those are at particularly household level. But beyond the household to the wider community, we still have covariant shocks that are continuing to dissipate our economies. The macroeconomic crisis that we see. Fuel prices have just been increasing, and when fuel prices increase, everything else increases because that's the factor of production. We have seen drought. At least we have been told that now there's going to be an El Nino, which is floods. But also, climate change has become very, very real, and it's now very unpredictable. And sometimes even production is now getting very untimed. But pandemics have taught us many things. We had COVID, we had Ebola, and others, and armed conflict, Congo, and others. So this means that investment in social protection helps us to address these across the life cycle. And again, this is just to say that because we have life cycle risks and vulnerabilities, and because we're faced with external shocks, now if you couple them with exclusion without social protection is a challenge. So what is social protection? With all this that we understand, social protection, as we have defined it in our social protection policy of 2015, contextualizes it in the Ugandan context as those public and private interventions that help to address risks and vulnerabilities, and mark the word, that expose individuals to income insecurity, social deprivation, leading to undignified lives, which is that life cycle that I just talked about. And for us to understand it well, we even unpack it further, that in our context, we have two pillars for social protection, and these are social security, where we have direct income support, which is normally it's either the cash or non-cash transfers that we give to vulnerable persons, and then social insurance, mainly the contributory social insurance. Then we also have the second pillar, which is the social care and support services, and this encompasses those services to persons, to those sections of the communities that are not able to care and support themselves. Could be children, could be working age, could be youth, could be older persons, could be persons with disabilities. And as we noted that we also have the family and clan support systems that have existed in Uganda before, like the mutual assistance groups, we have barrio groups, and neighborhood support groups. Now, these are social protection structures that, while for a very long time were useful, have started to die. And I think one of the challenges which the Committee of Practice has to do is to see how do we reinvigorate these structures to support the formal systems, especially that we know that financing will be a challenge or is still very low. So in terms of the legal framework for social protection, we have a number of laws that give us an anchorage for investment in social protection, starting with the Constitution under the National Objectives and Directives of State Policy number 16, which provides for the rights of all people, including the poor and vulnerable, to access social services, and also specifically mandates the state to take care of and provide for the aged. We also have the Pensions Act, CAP 286, which specifically provides for establishment of pensions, gratuities, and other allowances in respect to civil servants. But we also have the National Social Security Fund Act, CAP 22, which provides for social security benefits for persons in the private sector. More recently now, NSSF and pensions are quite initially very old laws that came up during the early 1960s and 70s. And with the recent one, the Uganda Retirement Benefits Regulatory Authority Act of 2011, and this provides for an institution to regulate the establishment, management, and operation of retirement benefit schemes in Uganda. We have the Social Protection Policy of 2015 that I already alluded to, which provides a comprehensive social protection system for Uganda, establishment of a comprehensive social protection system. But in addition to these, we don't live in an island. We have also ratified a number of conventions on laws that relate to social protection. Some of these include the ILO Convention, the Convention on the Rehabilitation of Persons with Disabilities, the International Covenant on Social and Economic Rights, among others. Others are Disability Act of 2020 and the Older Persons Act. All these provide for a set of social protection mechanisms for the vulnerable persons. And the legal framework is backed by a number of laws that we have in place. The National Social Protection Policy is just a repetition of what I said earlier. We have the National Social Protection Strategy, which we have in its very, very final draft, and this is of 2023. And this strategy provides that overarching framework for addressing social protection in the Ugandan context. We have also the National Orphans and Vulnerable Children's Policy, the strategy for extending social security to the informal sector. Now that has been a challenge for us. How do we extend this? This is also now in place. We also have a framework for providing social care and support services, as well as guidelines for labor-intensive public works, and particularly to enhance job creation and social protection. Now, to now have a deep dive into the coverage of the social protection schemes and interventions, again, I will use the same approach. I will go through the different pillars so that we can be able to see where we are as a nation and to be able to identify the emerging challenges. So under direct income support, we have a number of interventions, and these are particularly those that are supported from particularly the government resources and big development partners. We have the SAGE program, and this provides direct income support of what we know of 25,000 to all eligible older persons aged 80 years currently, and we are reaching 306,000. You know that this program started in 2010 in a phased manner. When we started, we were covering older persons who were aged 60 years, 65 years and above, and 60 years for the Karamoja region. And after that, we have since rolled on until 2018, when we achieved a national coverage. And that is a very, very, very big plus, because all of us that have interfaced with older persons do accept and see the value of this grant in the lives of older persons. We also have the Urban Cash for Work program that we are currently rolling out by the Ministry of Gender through the Expanding Social Protection Program, mainly in Arua, and this is covering 4,200 beneficiaries. This is being implemented with support from the International Labour Organization and was first implemented as a response to COVID-19. But now we are transitioning. Now COVID is long gone, and just a few days ago we were discussing how to roll this program further, expand it to other areas with the refugee settlements, such as Madiokolo, Isinjiro, and others. But this also provides the non-labor constrained households with cash of 6,000 upon doing some work, so that they can remain active but can also build community infrastructure. The same model of labor-intensive public works is being rolled out through the Development Response to Displacement Impacts Project, which is called Dr. Deep, and this particularly covers the original northern Uganda districts. So far, this has reached 43,084 households, which is 285,500 people. And these still get cash for maintaining and putting in place community infrastructure. We have in Kampala the Girls Empowering Girls program, which is implemented by KCCA, and this supports adolescent girls in and out of school. So far, we have 3,000 of these that are supported under this intervention. And we have also NutriCash, which is implemented by our colleagues from Office of the Prime Minister with support from WFP. And this targets particularly pregnant women and lactating mothers so that they could be able to finance some interventions to address those risks and vulnerabilities that we talked about in early childhood: immunization, stuntedness. So that is what the cash is supposed to be, so that they can buy the extra supplements and the food requirements. So far, this is reaching 13,000 beneficiaries in the parts that it's being implemented in. So that is for direct income support. We've pulled out this. This is not the exhaustive list, of the whole database of interventions in the private and public sector. We know that, for example, the stakeholders here, the NGOs, are supporting a number of interventions. And currently, the ministry is going to roll out a detailed mapping of these interventions for purpose of getting a bigger picture on the state. Under contributory social security, one is to make mention that we do have the public service pension scheme that targets civil servants that I talked about earlier. Currently, there is a bill in Parliament to turn this into a contributory scheme. Now, that is a good effort by the government, and we hope if it is taken on board, would really help in supporting and financing a lot of the challenges therein. We also have the National Social Security Fund, which I talked about, and the good news also is that the Act was amended to provide for midterm access and voluntary contribution, which is also a plus because midterm helps you to address those vulnerabilities that we talked about midway in your working age, but also the voluntary contribution is the persons of the informal sector, as we talked about. I talked about the strategy for expanding social security to the informal sector, because we think if we catch them, like those in the subsistence household and others, then we'll be able to move. And then the draft National Health Insurance Scheme, which is also before Parliament. So in terms of coverage, the Public Service Pension Scheme covers 410,000 members, and here we know former civil servants access this on a monthly basis. The NSSF covers 2,213,000 members, and these include the voluntary members, which has really been growing, and we need to support NSSF to be able to grow this membership. Under the occupational schemes, like Makerere University and others, Parliament, we have 42,948. And then the voluntary individual schemes are covering about 1,159. Now remember, these figures keep changing. Even as we speak today, some has been onboarded, and we need to support this process to ensure that we reach more people. So a deep dive into NSSF, just to give you a hint on the type of benefit schemes that people access more and relate it to the life cycle. Because as we do this, please relate this to the life cycle so that we can be able to know where the risk is highest. You note that just last financial year alone, 2022, the previous 2021, 2022, for age benefit, we had about 9,432 accessing the grants. Of course, we disaggregate this by male and female so that we can be able to see the gender dynamics and issues that emerge from Social Security. The withdrawal benefit, age benefit is mainly for members who have reached the retirement age of 55 years. And whether they are still in active employment or not, at that stage you can access, and that is the 9,432. We also had about 6,716 that accessed the withdrawal benefit. Then we had the exempted employment benefits, which are 5,859. Exempted employment is particularly for people who join institutions that have exemption in terms of contributing to NSSF, either by fact of them having their own schemes or having other schemes in place. For example, if you join the police, the army, or the UN agencies, you will be exempted from contributing. We have the invalidity benefit, where about 2,682 did access this, and this is mainly for members who lose the earning capacity either due to a physical or a permanent disability. When you talk of the survivors, these are 605, and again, this mainly for relatives of a deceased contributing member who was contributing. Now you can see the big animal in the room, the midterm access, 21,649. And again, it speaks to what we talked about. When COVID was here and government made a provision for that, it was to enable people cope with the challenges. Immigration is if you have permanently leaving the country, or permanently. You're leaving Uganda for a residence elsewhere, you access that. So you can see about 47,000 did access, and still under the pension, the public service, also about 62,000 in that year. So in terms of national health insurance, I had earlier talked about this, that our coverage is currently under 2% of the population, and most of the health insurance is provided by the private sector, with about 700,000 persons having been onboarded. There, and this number we can check, the community-based health insurance schemes are about 21 that are registered with those members. But we have a bill that is in cabinet, and we are very glad that our members of parliament have joined us. Honorables, you're very welcome. And this is one of the things that we do ask that you support and ensure that it is pushed to its logical conclusion. It will save quite a number of people. So with that, what are the implications of the numbers on the coverage of social protection? One is that social protection is largely covering persons in the formal sector. You saw with me the numbers. So where does it leave the informal sector? 80% of our economy is in the informal sector. So where are they? That means that they're on their own. The second, that social security benefits mainly benefit more men compared to women. Now this is a gender issue to it, because when for example you see the numbers, like on NSSF, look at them, 34,000 compared to 13,000. Most women are in the informal economy, particularly care work, and even others who are also contributing, they're also gender issues. So even as we engage on social protection, we need to ensure that the gender aspects of social protection are also taken care of. We also note that from the coverage, we see that only 18% of older persons receive a pension. Only 18%. And this is of the eligible, those that are 60 years and above. And this is particularly because the public service and the SAGE. Here we tactfully omit NSSF, because NSSF in the classic definition is a provident fund, is not a pension scheme, so that accounts to that low coverage. Then when it goes to even contribution, we note that about 5.1% of the persons in the labor force, in the active labor force, contribute to a pension. So the rest, where are they? That is why, even as we roll the committee of practice, as my colleague Gloria said, one of the issues that we will work is to deepen the understanding, knowledge, and appreciation of social protection, so that these aspects like contribution in advanced social security systems, contributor schemes actually take a bigger share, and that's why we need to be going, to encourage more contribution so that we can reduce on the expenses on the national economy. Then for the national total coverage is about 4% of the population. And also, while that is the case it is, the statistics from the Uganda National Household Survey 2019-2020 tell us that about 43% are at the brink. Brink means they have a high likelihood of falling into poverty should they be faced by a shock, which shock can either be an idiosyncratic shock at household level or a covariant shock. So imagine if this El Nino that, for example, the meteorological department has told us hits hard across the country, a big chunk of these people will then dip into poverty. Okay? Because there will be floods. Floods will affect many things. We know the ripple effect. Now, it's very, very dangerous to have a high population of people at the brink. Unless we have absorptive schemes like social protection interventions, then we almost risk an entire population. Under social care and support, remember I've navigated social security, looking at direct income support. I've also looked at social insurance. Now I am under social care and support pillar. And again here we note that particularly government has provided juvenile justice and probation services, and these are mainly to children, distressed families, through the probation and welfare officers in the local governments. The recruitment of this is not yet 100%, but the last data that we had was it's well over 50% across the region. But of course there are challenges. I believe we have all been reading where probation officers have children but cannot transport them to courts, have children, there are no rehabilitation centers that are enough for them, and among others. But at least the start is there. There are also mechanisms to protect children against abuse. We all know the Uganda Child Helpline, Sauti 116, that has really been used to report cases of child abuse. And through our platforms, we need to encourage use of this platform, Sauti 116, so that we popularize it among the population to enable the public to report. Because one of the challenges we saw is some of these vices are being propagated in the communities because people think they have nowhere to report. But when you give them a pathway to report, then we can be able to solve. A problem reported is a problem half solved, isn't it? Then we have withdrawal and resettlement of street children, particularly in Kampala. We know street children are not only from Kampala. All the 10 cities of Uganda are significantly affected, with the majority being in Kampala. There have been efforts through the ministry and working with KCCA to withdraw these. The challenge is they tend to come back. So we don't know. I think it's a big challenge. You withdraw them today, tomorrow you find them back. So I don't know whether some go and come back in the night, but there are efforts that are being undertaken. The ministry also has community rehabilitation institutions. There are 5 across the country, in Ochoko, Ogur, Mpumude, Chireka, and among others. Ruti is in Mbarara. For us who are that side, I believe we have interfaced with it. Ochoko is in Arua. Ogur is in Lira. Mpumude is in Jinja. And Chireka is in Kampala, or call it Wakiso. And these community rehabilitation centers provide an opportunity for particularly persons with disabilities to gain skills. And again, we want to urge that within our respective platforms, we support the persons with disabilities to access these institutions. Some of these trainings are, I think, free, Head. Yes, they are free. So don't let the persons with disabilities in your communities suffer when there are opportunities in these institutions. At least reach out to the ministry and we see how they can be supported to enroll in these. We have also institutional support for vulnerable children, and we are as well linking up with other, particularly homes. We have children's homes. The ministry does regulation and registration of children's homes. Sanyu Baby's Home, the ones for Watoto, among others. That is all to support this process. But also there are remand homes. Okay? As you do rehabilitation, you also do remand homes, particularly on access to justice. We have a remand home, and these are regional in Moroto, in Kabale, in Inaguru, in Arua, in Gulu, in Mbale, in Fort Poto, and Itungu in Masindi. And there is a huge, huge outcry. Every time we go to the communities, they say, can you open up a remand home? But also we have the big one, Kampiringisa, which is the National Rehabilitation Center, and also the one in Naguru. I talked about the institutional support for the elderly, which is the Ginger Home for the elderly in Mpumude, and this particularly looks after the destitute older persons. These are those that have no homes, have no traceable families, and they are accommodated there. But we have a big one, which is a private sector one, which is in Rubaga, which is called Nalukolongo Bakateyamba Home. It's run by the Catholic Church. So this, if you go there, you'll see older persons are being supported. Now, all this provides institutions for providing social care and support. But under social care and support, we want to note that most of it actually is provided by the non-state actors, by the NGOs, by the private sector. They're the ones who are doing majority of the provision of social care and support services. Then we now switch to the last part of my presentation, which is on financing social protection delivery in the country. And I'll start with the bigger picture. the global picture on the public expenditure for social protection as compared to GDP, again, with other regions. You will see that as a country, we are not doing well. These are not all the countries of Africa Union. There are about 54 countries. And out of just those that we have picked, you can see that South Africa spends about 5.5% of their GDP on social protection. Others who are our neighbors, Kenya about 1%, Rwanda about 1.7%, together with Tanzania, and Uganda spends 0.7%. Now I want you to put this expenditure with the risks and vulnerabilities that we face, and then be able to compare and see the picture. So we go to a deep dive on the sources of financing, because we have seen 0.7%, and on the sources of financing, particularly we want to look between the government and donors. Now when you include all programs, this is direct income support and social care and support services, you will see that the financing has been growing. The investment by government since 2015 to 21-22 has largely been growing. But in Part B, when you exclude public service pension scheme, and particularly look at direct income support, you see that the tide changes. It has mainly been donor supported. Have you seen now the difference? And I will tell you more in the next slide. So it means in here, again using the same years for 2015 and 2021, when you break down by the different areas of social development, social insurance, social care and support services, direct income support, which I talked about here, the public service takes the largest share. So if you're looking at the aggregate picture, you may think the investment is big. You do a deep dive, you find that most of it goes to the public service pension scheme, and less of direct income support, where majority of the people require support. But under the expanding social protection program, the financing has been growing. In 2010, government was investing just about 100 million shillings as part of counterpart funding, because then we had FCDO, then was still DFID, and Irish Aid, and other people, UNICEF and others, were putting in most of the money. So government was providing counterpart funding. And because of the impact and evidence of this program, across the years, investment has increased into social protection. You can see from 105, by 2015, by 2017, it had gone higher to 17 billion. By 2018-19, it was at 62 billion. And 2020-21, it was at 121 billion. And when the donors pulled out, as at the 30th of June, last financial year, the government has now taken over 100% financing for the senior citizens grant and provides 121.2 billion. That is for a big clap for government. And I say this because we have seen that not many interventions in Africa that are started by donors graduate to being government finance. This is one of the classic examples of a graduation from a donor-funded program to a fully government of Uganda-owned program. But while we also note this, and government has been providing for older persons, one of the challenges which emerges is that the grant value has been declining. Here we see that when we started in 2010-11, we were providing 25, but because of inflation, you will see that the grant value has declined. If you equate it to what it can provide today, it's about 14.5 thousand. So this means one of the key messages here is that let's advocate for increment of the grant, as well as reduction of the eligibility criteria for SAGE, so that we can have more people who are below 75 years and above accessing the grant. Here we talk about the transmission mechanisms, particularly on the impacts. for social protection. And this is very critical, that in the short, long term, in the short, medium, and long term, social protection helps you to unplug some of the gaps. It helps you with poverty reduction because it supports households to build resilience. And this we saw in the impact evaluation of SAGE, where we saw that the beneficiaries moved out of poverty by about 10 percentage points. We talk of improved consumption and nutrition, where we talk of, say for example, under SAGE, the impact evaluation that we did, we saw that the percentage of people that had were consuming more than 2 meals a day had significantly improved. Other benefits are on access to health and education, and particularly health, and this because we know that up to 26% of older persons look after grandchildren. And when they get their monies, where do they invest them? They buy books, they buy pens, and support education. Right now, with the support of UNICEF, the ministry is undertaking a modeling study on the investment case for social protection that will help us build more evidence on the impacts of social protection in Uganda. In the long term, we have seen human capital development, labor market participation, and improved productivity. When you look at the life cycle that I talked about, early childhood stuntedness, the unemployment, the child labor, when you invest and plug those holes, you have human capital development, which is the theme for the NDP 3. Not the theme, but one of the key pillars of NDP 3. But also accumulation of assets and improved incomes and security, and also stops intergenerational transmission of poverty. That has been a very big challenge for the nation. And the outcomes are clear. When you have these, who doesn't want to have inclusive growth? We have always talked of growth that is growing, but people are not seeing it. And when you invest in social protection, you will grow and you will see the growth, but also contributing sustainable poverty reduction and building social cohesion. Now I say building social cohesion because we also have a study that we are just concluding with UNICEF on the impact of targeting mechanisms, social protection targeting mechanism on social cohesion, because we've realized that social protection and targeting mechanisms particularly can help with building social cohesion within the communities. So when you invest in social protection, some of the things that we see today could be addressed, and we have a more cohesive and more realistic society. So that is the conclusion. I just want to repeat by just saying one line, that when you expand social protection in Uganda, our modeling says that we could be self-sustaining by financial year 2030, 2031. The impact study, the simulation study, which was done on the economic and poverty impacts of the expanding social protection program in Uganda, and those are the authors, notes that impacts relating to increases in household incomes, household consumption, employment rates will lead to generation of additional taxes, which can be used to fund future cash transfers and therefore minimizing reallocation from other investments. So let's invest in social protection. We'll achieve self-sustainability, but we'll also be able to support the economy grow. I want to thank you very much for listening to me, and I hand over back to the moderator.
Thank you very much. Please give him much more than that. He deserves a rousing round of applause. Thank you so much, Paul. I don't want to preempt the excitement that Paul has generated in his, with his concluding remarks on the strategic value of social protection. And so I'll keep that bubbling in your heads and move on to one of the most exciting parts of this discussion. It's exciting because I've been looking very forward to hearing from our keynote speaker today, Professor Ezra Suruma. So let me introduce Professor Ezra Suruma. For those of you that may not know who he is, I know all the Ugandans do, but in the room we've got people who are not from Uganda and may not know or could have just heard about Dr. Suruma. Professor Ezra Suruma is a distinguished scholar and statesman. He has a wealth of experience in finance and banking, spanning more than 2 decades, 2.5 decades, I should say. He attained his doctoral degree of economics from the University of Connecticut in the USA, and his Master's of Arts in Economics in 1972, and a Bachelor of Science in Finance in 1969, both from Fordham University in the USA. Presently, Professor Suruma is a senior presidential advisor responsible for finance and planning. He also serves on the board of the National Planning Authority and participates in numerous national and international economic policy discussions and initiates proposals for change. I've heard that some of the biggest reforms happening now have had his hands in them. He is the head of the Prime Minister's Delivery Unit, responsible for implementation of priority programs of the government of Uganda. And from 2005 to 2009, Professor Suruma served as our Minister of Finance, where he was internationally recognized for his outstanding service when he won the award of Africa's Best Minister of the year 2008. He's been at the center of objective interactions and negotiations with numerous financial institutions such as the IMF and the World Bank, the Africa Development Bank, China Development Bank, among others. And he's also a founder member of Ugaford Microfinance Limited, which has 12 branches in Uganda today. He has had a distinguished career teaching in Uganda and in the United States, and after that, in 1987, he joined government service as the Director of Research in the Central Bank of Uganda in 1990, and later served as Chairman and Managing Director of the Uganda Commercial Bank. It's a very long CV, but I also must say that Professor Suruma has been a significant player in the stabilization, reconstruction, restructuring, and management of the Ugandan economy since 1986. In this bio, they don't talk about his most recent book that I've read about the Ugandan economy, and I hope he can talk to us about it. But I decided to read his bio so you can get a sense of how privileged we are to be having him as a keynote speaker on social protection, because this is one of the areas that's been most neglected in this country. We've got 30% of our children stunted. Paul Onapa was talking about the contributory social protection system. If you don't improve your human capital and its productivity and therefore employability, its adaptability to a changing and technologically driven world, you will not grow those contributions, Paul. It's not going to be possible. And so, ladies and gentlemen, men, well, join me to welcome Professor Suruma, who will give us a presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tumesije, for your very kind introduction. Just a slight correction. Uganda has 18 branches in the country so far. So it's a microfinance bank we founded in the 90s. And also, when I was in the central bank, I served both as Director of Research and as Deputy Governor. Not that it matters much, but I thought I would let you know. This says that my battery is running out. I hope not. So anyway, I hope everything will be fine. Good morning again to you all. It's a great pleasure and privilege to be among you this morning. I would like to thank people who have spoken before me. Stephen, thank you very much. Paul, thank you very much for the excellent lecture. I learned a lot. Gloria, thank you very much for the introduction. My topic, building on the gains made to enhance financing for social protection in Uganda. I would like to particularly thank Gloria. We met at a conference on social protection. I think it was made by Uganda Data Network, and I made opening remarks, and she's very kind enough to follow up and invite me to this forum. I'm very grateful to her for her follow-up. And as the MC said, as David said, I have published a book on advancing the Ugandan economy. It was published by Brookings Institution in 2014. I was privileged to be a distinguished visiting fellow to that think tank, which is in Washington, D.C., and was able to do the research to do the book. Now, Brookings Institution said because they paid for me to be in Washington, D.C., I would not share in the royalties from the book. So all the money that you pay in buying the book goes to Brookings Institution. So when I'm urging you to look at it, not because I'm going to benefit financially, but I hope it's on Amazon. Feel free to check it out. And the remarks I'm going to make today are really from that book and that research that I was privileged to do at that time. Things are a little bit out of date, but the principles remain intact. Introduction, defining the problem. Already my predecessors, previous speakers, have done a lot to define it, so I'll be very brief here. There are Ugandans who are living in a subhuman state, dash a less than human state. I think Paul used the term dignified. This is the same point. This word subhuman, as some of you who have listened to me before, I got it from Germany. Dr. Honorable Speciosa Wandira Kazibwe, when she was vice president, asked me to do a paper on social security. And as part of my research, I went to Germany because they did the foundations of social security in the 1870s. And when I met the director of social security in Germany, he used this word, that for them, they believe that no German citizen should be allowed to live in a subhuman state. No German citizen should be allowed to fall into a less than human state. And every time I'm moving around and seeing our children and seeing on the street, lying on the street, or eating from searching in the garbage for something to eat, I can't help remembering this word, subhuman state. So you and I have to make up our minds. Should we cooperate with the Germans and say no Ugandan child, no Ugandan elder should live in a subhuman state? That's a question we must answer. 2, they cannot access basic human needs, food, as you see in Karamoja, a good example, shelter, homeless, medicine. When somebody calls you and they have malaria and they can't afford the medicine, you know, it's something which can be cured, but if they don't get medicine, they will die. And they do. Clothing, I suppose because we are living in the tropics, you can do without clothing. At least it's warm. But for those people in the winter out there, it's a critical requirement. Clean water. My friend Ephraim Kamuntu, when he was a minister in that sector, I remember him showing photos of children and women going 4 kilometers to fetch water, carrying water on the head. I did it too when I was a child. I used to carry water on my head. I remember specifically, I was staying with the relatives while I think I was in P5. And unfortunately for me, the sufuria, what's sufuria in English? I don't know, saucepan, which I was carrying, had a hole in it. So the water would be pouring on me as I was carrying the pot in the morning before going to school. I had to fetch water, but I would be wet. But that's it was only maybe 400 or 500 meters away, but people have to go several kilometers, some of them up and down mountains. So water is life, as you know, and the people don't have water. So the causes of poverty and employment, disability, old age, which has been clearly pointed out, natural disasters, orphans, and so on. Some societies, this is going back to the point I just made, take the view that the dignity of man is inviolable, something which should not be violated. And therefore, access to the basic needs of survival should be assured to everyone. We are all a part of one human family, and we are interdependent. Therefore, the dehumanization of any person should be seen as the dehumanization of all members of the society, which is not acceptable to a civilized society. You may be comfortable and willing to live with the dehumanization because it is not happening to you. But tomorrow, you never know what will happen to your child or grandchild or yourself. I've just been reading the book of Ecclesiastes. And times change. You can be very rich today and totally devastated tomorrow. And if you have not cared or think that didn't matter, you will face hard times. And that's what Paul was talking about, the changing times, the shocks that occur in human life. So let's not think that this program is for the others. No, it can happen to you anytime, anywhere. It's for all of us. So this concept of social security is shared by all civilized societies, irrespective of whether they are capitalist or communist. It's an interesting point. It's an area where both capitalists and communists, I found, have something in common. I lived in America for a long time, and I usually tell the story of how my first wage as an undergraduate student working in the library, they deducted, I think, $2 or $3. And my wage was like $18. And I said, how can you take my money? They said, it's Social Security. I said, what is Social Security? They couldn't explain. I said, me, I'm not going to live here. When I finish, I'm going back home. So give me back my money. They said, get out. They took the money. But they're giving it to me now. 50 years or 60 years later. And I'm grateful. And then, of course, the communists, for them, equality and well-being for all is the foundation of communism and socialism. So here, there's no conflict between capitalism and communism. As I said, all civilized societies. So maybe the difference between us and the rest is how civilized are we to accept this principle that we will not allow the dehumanization of anyone, of our children, of our aged people, of our disabled people, of our women or men. All of us are entitled to protection, social protection. So why is, next slide. Why is social protection justified? Because no Ugandan citizen should be left to live in a subhuman state. No Ugandan should be left to starve to death. No Ugandan should be consistently homeless, sleeping in open air. No Ugandan should be without basic medical care or health insurance. Social security encompasses the security of all members of society. Those who are employed will be protected by their earnings. But for those who are not employed, a civilized society is obliged to make arrangements for their protection. And I'm glad the trade union people are here. The types of protection required include child protection, unemployment insurance, health insurance, occupational accident insurance, old age insurance or pension insurance, veterans insurance, and so on. Now, this is the topic that are mainly given to me. How is Social Security financed? Some of the ways that Social Security may be financed include deductions from the employee's wages, such as ones which were made from my $18. I think that's back in 1967, when I was first or second year in college. The deductions are taken from your salary and kept for the future. Deductions from employers, as with Social Security, we deduct both from the employees, and from the employers. They both contribute to that future protection. Government taxes can also be used. Personal insurance, many of us have taken measures for personal insurance. It's one option. Private savings and wealth accumulations, and combinations of above means and other methods. Overview of Uganda's progress towards an inclusive national protection system and growing commitment financing social protection. After what Paul has presented, I think I'll skip this. He has shown that there has been an increasing commitment by the government to social protection. It's growing, but as he showed in his first graph, compared to even other African countries, it is very small. Income insecurity encourages corruption. I just thought I should, it's in my book, and I thought I should include it, not jump it. It's just so that, because we know that corruption is a big problem. And we will ask why is there so much corruption in our country? Income insecurity encourages corruption. Income insecurity exists at all levels of Ugandan society and is a major source of widespread corruption. Workers in both the public and private sectors attempt to gain income security by any means possible. You have heard the expression that man eateth where man worketh. You don't think they mean eating kabaragara? No, they mean stealing. When they say man eateth where he worketh, they mean when you are giving. When I became Minister of Finance, a businessman, whom I will not mention, said, now is your chance. You should never be poor again. And I looked at him and I felt very sorry. I don't feel that way at all. I didn't tell him that, but the idea that when you're given a job, that's your opportunity to steal is very, very unfortunate and very sad. And you'll never get rich that way. You just destroy yourself and help destroy the company that could have grown if you had acted better. You think you are benefiting, but you're actually destroying yourself and destroying others. Youth unemployment, thirdly, youth unemployment and corruption pose real challenges to Uganda's future stability. I think this is clear to many of us. One of the core requirements of economic policy is to create real opportunities for all citizens to access income legally and ethically over the entire lifetime. Opportunities for all citizens to access income legally and ethically over their entire lifetime. An environment of widespread and persistent unemployment is an admission, an indication of the weakness of the prevailing economic ideology. I'm not campaigning for office, but I'm not afraid to say that if you have widespread unemployment, it means there's something wrong with the economy, isn't it? You don't have to be a genius to recognize something's wrong with the economy and something needs to be changed. The economic ideology has a problem. Furthermore, an environment of massive unemployment and widespread corruption is inherently unstable, as we are seeing in West African countries these days. It breeds immorality, as citizens are forced to resort to theft, robbery, murder, and rebellion in order to survive. This is undesirable and unsustainable. So what is the solution? Here is the solution. Can you see that? That's a rig in the oil, in the lake, an oil rig. Fortunately, our rig, maybe this was not a good photo because our rigs are on the shore. They're on land just beside the Lake Albert, for those of you who may have seen it. Oil revenues offer an opportunity to increase employment and social security. I use social security and social protection interchangeably. So I hope it's clear to everyone. I believe they mean the same thing. One, when the oil companies sell the petroleum to other countries, they will first deduct the cost of producing the oil. Like any business, when you sell, the money you get, you first have to cover the costs that were involved in the cost of production. Thank you. Secondly, they then pay the government of Uganda an amount of money equal to about 65% of the balance from the oil exports. It's according to existing what we call oil sharing agreements. Three, in addition, the companies are required to pay a tax on their profits. Four, and a royalty payment for mining the oil in Uganda. All these payments may amount to as much as 80% of the total value of the oil the companies will sell from Uganda. You can do the research yourself. I stand to be corrected. But those are my estimates. An illustration of the oil revenue calculation. For example, suppose that the companies pump and sell 250,000 barrels of oil a day and receive about $80 per barrel after cost. This means that the value of this oil will be $20 million a day, 250,000 times 80. If the government takes 65% of this, That will amount $13 million a day, 0.65 of 20 million. In a month, this will come to $390 million, US dollars. And in a year, the total will be 4.68 billion that's coming to government. Consider a more optimistic oil revenue scenario. The other scenario is kind of average, but as we've been discovering more and more reserves, there are opportunities for more oil being exported daily. The most optimistic scenario that I could think of is that more oil reserves will be found, perhaps boosting production to 500,000 barrels a day. On top of this, let's say that the price of oil might rise to $100 a barrel or more. I think at the time I was writing, the price had gone to $147 per barrel, but of course, it has gone back now, but you know what's happening at the pump. Prices will go up and down. At $100 a barrel, that will mean 50 million a day. At 80% tax rate, the government could conceivably take in $40 million daily. This translates 1.2 billion monthly. On an annual basis, the government will receive 14.4 billion. And this amounts 53.3 trillion shillings, which is the total amount of the budget for next fiscal year. So your problem is solved. But this is an optimistic scenario. Just to give you, you got a fragrance, a fragrance of what could happen in the years ahead. The oil costs and corruption. So there is a chapter in my book, all of this is taken from the book, and the chapter is entitled Oil Costs and Blessing. Basically, as the oil money flows into the national treasury, many people are likely to attempt various schemes to illegally divert it in their direction. That is, to steal the money. Such corruption, of course, will not be limited to the central government, nor to any specific government ministry. Every government jurisdiction in Uganda is likely to be affected, from the central government in Kampala to local governments. And so too will be private entities that receive contracts for public projects financed by the oil money. So everyone who is getting a contract for a road or a bridge or a building, they will all be looking to get their share of this money by any means. Should corruption become endemic, the country is likely to squander its oil windfalls and get little or no real development out of them. Now, there's a question, a fundamental question, on who has the right to the oil money. And it's not an irrelevant question. Should all the oil revenues go to public goods? Public goods are the goods of government. Defense, roads, bridges, airports, maintaining law and order, those are what we call public goods. The work of government is primarily to provide public goods, as opposed to private goods. Bread, clothing, those are private goods. So one argument is that all this money, the taxes we're talking about, should go to the government so that they can use it to pay for public goods, for infrastructure. Does the provision of public goods mean that the government should not worry about income support? That is, transfer payments to households whose income places them below the national poverty line. In other words, does the provision of roads, schools, national security, law and order, and public health satisfy all the basic needs of the people? Are these public goods and services really more important to the people than their personal needs? And I say certainly not. Social protection is as important as public goods. Can one safely say that it is all right for the government to accumulate billions of dollars in an oil fund at the Bank of Uganda to hold for future generations when current generations of men, women, and children are going without food or medicine or shelter? Because it has been said that the money from oil should be put in a fund, and that fund should be for financing future generations. So the question I'm asking is, should you be more worried about future generations when people are sleeping on the streets or going without food? And you say, no, let them die, let's save the money for future generations. Are future generations more deserving than today's poor Ugandans? I believe that the issue requires more debate throughout Uganda. Lessons in public-private partnership from Alaska and Norway. So as I was doing my research, I looked into this issue, and I came up with a case of Alaska and Norway. They are both major oil producers. To ensure that both present and future generations of Alaskans benefit from the state's oil wealth, the Alaskan government created a permanent fund in which about 20% of the royalties paid by the oil companies to the government are deposited. Okay, Alaska created an oil fund in which about 20% of the royalties paid by the oil companies to the government are deposited. The money in the fund is managed and invested on behalf of the people of Alaska by professional investment firms. Earnings from those funds are distributed to all the citizens of Alaska. All the citizens of Alaska every year, based on the fact that it is the citizens who own the state's mineral wealth, which of course includes the oil. That's their thinking, that's their logic. Is there a problem? So that's Alaska. So those of you, your geography, Alaska is a very big state in the northwest. It's not geographically connected to America, but it's actually northwest of Canada. But it's a very big state with a lot of oil, and it's a part of the United States. It's a part of America. Second example is the oil revenue management in Norway. In the case of Norway, the taxes and other payments from the oil companies to the government have been placed in a fund called the Norwegian Pension Fund Global. Norwegian Pension Fund Global. These funds are also managed by professional investment managers. Professional investment managers. And the earnings from these funds are used to pay pensions for the people of Norway. The earnings from these funds are used to pay for pensions for the people of Norway. Under this public program, citizens of Norway are guaranteed pension income once they reach old age. Should Uganda copy Alaska and Norway? And I said, what a great dream for Uganda. Uganda is not allowed to dream. Must we forever be the wretched of the earth? Must we continue to have an uncertain future when oil royalties could be used to minimize the risk of retiring to a life of poverty and misery? How I wish that the old people of Uganda could also have a good pension. Since most Ugandans are going to be old one day, I didn't say all, I said most, because some of us may pass away before old age. But hopefully, many of us, our life expectation is over 60 now, isn't it? 63. So we are getting there. Since most Ugandans are going to be old one day, why do we not unite with one voice and demand that the old and the disabled be protected from destitution? Would it not be most efficacious to create a fund that is professionally managed and then use the earnings from the fund to meet the needs of orphans, the disabled, the unemployed, the aged, and other economically vulnerable groups? I vote yes. What about you? I think the ayes have it. We deserve a referendum. The people of Uganda have the right to change their laws to make the establishment of such a fund possible. Through a referendum, the people can be asked if they would like to receive shares in a permanent fund that would grant them the right to gain directly from the fund's earnings. With that fund in place, all citizens would benefit from the country's oil wealth and would be allowed to participate in the decision on how to allocate it. The decision on how to spend oil royalties should not be made exclusively by civil servants and politicians. Only a participatory, inclusive, people-driven, and bottom-up, that is democratic, decision-making process can ensure that the oil wealth is allocated efficiently, non-corruptly, and equitably. Once the citizens are made shareholders in the fund, they would be free to meet yearly or annually, to select directors, and to receive an accounting from the managers of the fund. We can and should learn from Alaska. And that's what they did. They had a referendum and voted. And people voted to create these funds. And so they did. These ideas will not be popular with the politicians and bureaucrats who would like to have a stranglehold monopoly on the management and investment of the oil revenues. However, the oil is the people's property, and the decision on how to dispose of it is ultimately their right. The people of Alaska have shown that such participatory management of a public resource can be undertaken through a democratic process, and that the process can be managed equitably and efficiently. There is no reason why Ugandans could not attempt to benefit from the experiences of Alaska and Norway. "50% of the net revenues from oil could be placed at the disposal of the people. In my estimation, as much as 50% of the net revenue from oil could be placed at the disposal of the people of Uganda by means of a Uganda Petroleum Wealth Fund." An appeal to the NRM, and I'm a found member of the NRM, for those of you who don't know. 1980. I had to run for my life. By God's grace, I'm still standing. The NRM's original philosophy rested on two pillars: anti-sectarianism and anti-authoritarianism. Therefore, when the NRM is true to its movement principles, it will always seek to maintain this balance between the power of the government and the freedom of the governed. It will divide the oil revenues between public and private interest so as to maintain a healthy balance between the two. A public sector that is too strong will destroy freedom. A private sector that is too weak will increase corruption and promote authoritarianism. Political unity is required to make oil the blessing of Uganda. Furthermore, I also expect the opposition parties to embrace the general outline of this blueprint with enthusiasm rather than turn it into a disruptive political football. It will be groundbreaking for the incumbent government and the opposition to stand shoulder to shoulder to maximize an opportunity that at best arises once in a lifetime. Such cooperation will be rewarded with the greatest of gratitude on the part of the people of Uganda, recognizing that for once, politicians refuse to turn a blessing into a totalitarian or sectarian cause. The people of Uganda should have their full say in a nationwide vote. because I think we are told that we are here to promote, isn't it? Social protection. So I think I'm not doing the wrong thing. I'm saying this is how we can together lobby, advocate for the welfare of all the people of Uganda. To ensure that such a vote takes place, it is the duty and right of the people to put legitimate pressure on their elected representatives toward this end, regardless of their political affiliation. Without such pressure for full participation in deciding this matter, a precious opportunity for Uganda to take steps toward prosperity for all may well be lost. Nothing will be handed to anyone on a silver platter, but if all Ugandans were to join hands in taking determined action, Ugandan oil wealth would truly turn into a blessing for the whole country in all its segments. I do believe that if the people of Uganda were given the opportunity to choose, they would overwhelmingly opt for the 50-50 division of oil revenues between the people and their government. Thank you very much.
Wow, wow, wow. Can we please give the professor another round of applause? Thank you so much, sir. I would say this is the conversation that's been missing in our politics. And we are at the tipping point, thanks to you, because this is the conversation that needs to be happening in Uganda. So thank you very much once again, Professor Suruma. We have a panel discussion to reflect on such a speech. And, it's mind-boggling, to imagine that someone, will even differ. But I'm very keen to hear how people concur with such brilliant ideas, and most importantly, how our panelists can help us bring these ideas to life in a very practical manner, since a lot of them are actively involved in this kind of work. So without much ado, I would like to invite our panelists. We've got 4 of them. I'll start with Mr. Milton Turyareba, who is the Chairman General of COF2, to please come and sit at this head table in panel style. We always want to do it this way. I'd like to invite Mr. Frederick Makaire, the Executive Director of Save for Health, Uganda. I would like to invite Honorable Silas Algon to join our panel. And finally, Honorable Jacob Opolot. And what we'd like to do is to hear your very quick reflections on Professor Suruma's very imaginative and practical ideas on how Uganda can finance a more equitable, a more inclusive and cohesive economy, because that's kind of like the thread I had him talking about. So thank you very much, panelists. We've got several microphones, so I would like at least to have 2 of them on the panel here. Some of us will have questions for Paul and Stephen, but Stephen and Paul and Gloria stated facts. Those you can clarify them, they are in the reports. And we basically have, it's about 40 minutes to the end of this session, but you will have a chance. But I would like to take a maximum of 10 minutes, so that's 2.5 minutes each of you to reflect independently on the ideas that Professor Suruma have put across. You don't have to start with the referendum, but I see 2 politicians here, so you might want to start there. Can we start with you, Honorable Algon? And if you can kindly introduce yourself, because you were not here when we introduced ourselves.
Okay, maybe you guide me again. You said I do what?
What do you think about Dr. Suruma's idea?
Yeah, first of all, I think it was a great presentation. But let me first introduce myself. Silas Augon, Member of Parliament representing the people of Kumi Municipality in the Kumi District, Teso Sub-Region. In the executive or the board of the forum, I represent Eastern Uganda, and I'm happy to be here. Yeah. I want to believe Professor made such a wonderful presentation. One, personally, I've always been concentrating on other sources of finance for social protection. I had not thought about the oil money. Kumbe, that is the big one. And Professor, that's why you're a professor. You've opened my eyes. And now I get to see that there is a future for this country. The problem is about the oil curse and how we deal with it. When you did the figures, when you talked about the oil sharing agreement, how those who are going to help us will take their part and government will take their part, my heart was thinking about risk management, how we manage the risk. Yes, there is a big opportunity, but is Uganda able to maintain that opportunity and actually go for the money? You did pose a question, are we not right to dream? And I think we are right to dream. Uganda should dream big. And I think the future is open. This oil money will change the things. You asked a question about Alaska and Norway, which way to go. The government, the public vis-a-vis the private sector, which one should be strong? The cost of corruption, participation by the citizens of this country, where I even think now we need to have an act of parliament on matters of participation, public participation in the democracy of this country. When we take decisions which are coming from all the politicians and the civil servants, and we exclude the informal masses, what is the cost? I think you have shed such a light, and this is the debate which must be done now. If we wait for the oil to come out and then we start, we shall be wrong. That one I can tell you. We are late. This is the time.
Thank you very much, Honorable
Yes,
Algon.
and as I keep quiet and switch off my microphone, indeed, it's very, very important for us to realize that it's not just about the oil money. There are other sources of finance. Our eyes must be open. And finally, you said, they asked you out of the $18 or so, to put aside something for your future and you felt so bad, that is where the sickness is in Uganda. Nobody wants to save for the future. We want to grab it all and eat it today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable. Milton, you represent the voices of the workers. And Professor Suruma put it very clearly, the income insecurity that most of our workers face drives corruption. Is that true?
Well, thank you, moderator. I'm Milton Triareva. I'm the Chairman General Central Organization of Free Trade Unions, but I'm also a National Treasurer of University Professional and Academic Staff Union. Professor Suruma, I'm also in your occupation. I'm an accountant by training. I'm also a lecturer at Chambogo University. This debate today is very interesting. And I think each one of us here will agree that Professor has really stood the title to enlighten Ugandans. I wish all Ugandans were listening, because one of the problems we have in Uganda is that there is no sensitization of the masses right away from the laws these honorables make. People don't know. I was listening from the first presentations, interventions that the ministry is doing. The stakeholders don't know. And how do we make sure that we empower the populace to stand up for their rights? Professor Suruma is talking about a referendum. He's talking about the ownership of the oil proceeds. But how does the common person, at the grassroots root level, view it? Do they even know that Uganda is about to get oil? So that you know that they can own? Do they know that this is their project? Because one statement, somebody said, my oil. So, now whose oil is it now? How are we sure that even the oil we are waiting for is not already sold? We might be waiting for revenues when the oil was sold in raw form. But anyway, leaving that alone, let's be optimistic that the oil wells are going to get us revenue. You see that from the onset, World Bank has cut off its loans. But I think we can do without these loans. For example, if we made a financial audit on all these loans, is there visibility to see value for money in the corruption that is tainted everywhere, like Professor said, that money eats where he works? There are people that are yearning that, I wish I could be made a minister so that I access these services. From the workers' perspective, Professor Suruma, good enough you are near the power B. We've been agitating for minimum wage. But the issue is that if you bring a minimum wage, you chase away the investors. But these investors, where they come from, they have minimum wages. Studies have been made, and they are on record. Can say 150,000 chase away an investor? Because these are operational costs and inevitable operational costs. And that's why we said as labor unions, let the minimum wage be set, but across the sectors. What happens in education is not what happens in agriculture, is not what happens in. But people are scared that even a house girl will be entitled for a minimum wage. Yes, why not? It's providing labor, and labor should be at a cost. When you look at placements in government institutions and across the board, as labor unions, we have always said that why shouldn't you have equal pay for equal qualification? There is a lot of salary discrimination, selective salary enhancement. I'm not demising my science teachers, but look at an English teacher. Can a science teacher be taught by himself? So where do you classify an English teacher? Who teaches a science teacher? You've gone to the same universities. And why do you discriminately say, by the way, being a science teacher does not mean that you're a science or a scientist? If you are using chalk that is made by others, even made from Katwe, but you are a science teacher who cannot even make a chalk, are you a scientist?
No, you're not. Thank you so much, Mr. Turiare. But I would like to turn very quickly to Mr. Makaire. I think Paul's presentation did share the levels of coverage of social protection in Uganda. You work for Save for Health in Uganda and you appreciate the low levels of health coverage. The idea that Professor Suruma is suggesting to increase income security for all Ugandans, how do you see that as an enabler for better financial access to health services? Because that's one of the objectives of social protection. And so what was going in your mind when Dr. Suruma was talking about using this money for citizens themselves?
Thank you so much, Lambert, and thank you so much, Professor Suruma and the other speakers. Once again, I'm Frederick Makaire from Save for Health Uganda. We mainly promote community-based health insurance schemes, and so you are very right to ask me to comment for the aspect of health, access to health, in Professor Suruma's keynote address. I wanted to build it from the angle of the theme he has chosen for this keynote, building on the gains made to enhancing financing of social protection in Uganda. Because I think sometimes when we are in these discussions and when we are planning for the future, sometimes we ignore what has already been started, and then we restart things and then probably don't benefit from what has already been going on. So I wanted to inform the audience that since 1996, in Uganda, we have been running community-based health insurance schemes. They started a long time ago in 1996 from Western Uganda. And as you heard from the presentation, there are currently about 20 schemes across the country covering close to 150,000 people. Professor Suruma made a key point which I wanted to use for my comments, that if people are sick and don't get medicine, they die. All of us were here during COVID. I think we all witnessed what he talked about. When COVID came, whether you were rich or poor, access to medicine was not there, and a lot of people died. Sometimes medicine was available, but because there was no money to access the